The morning mist clung to the desert floor like ghostly fingers as Captain Marcus Thompson rode toward Fort Carson with his regiment. The year was 1882, and the Apache Wars had left deep scars across the Arizona Territory. Marcus had seen enough. Bloodshed to last several lifetimes, yet duty called him forward each day. As they crested a rocky hill, the fort came into view. Its wooden walls stood stark against the orange sunrise, casting long shadows across the compound. Marcus noticed something unusual immediately. A crowd had gathered near the holding cells at the eastern edge of the fort. The murmur of voices carried on the desert wind, creating an atmosphere of tension that made his horse nervous beneath him. "What's all that commotion, Captain?" asked Sergeant Rodriguez, pulling his horse alongside Marcus. The veteran soldier had been with Marcus through 3 campaigns, and his instincts were rarely wrong about trouble brewing. Marcus squinted toward the crowd, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Let's find out, Sergeant. Something tells me this isn't going to be a quiet morning." They spurred their horses forward, dust clouds rising behind them as they descended toward the fort. As they drew closer, Marcus could make out the figures more clearly. Soldiers stood in a rough circle, their voices raised in heated discussion. Some gestured angrily toward the holding cells, while others shook their heads in apparent disagreement. Lieutenant Hayes broke away from the crowd as Marcus and his men approached. The young officer's face was flushed with excitement and something that looked like fear. He hurried toward them, stumbling slightly over a loose stone in his haste. "Captain Thompson, thank God you're here, sir. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Marcus dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. "What kind of situation, Lieutenant? And why is half the garrison standing around instead of attending to their duties?" Hayes glanced nervously toward the crowd before answering. "Sir, we captured an Apache woman yesterday evening. She was found near the water wells, apparently alone. But that's not the strangest part, Captain." "Go on," Marcus said, though something in his gut told him he might not like what he was about to hear. "She's been asking for you specifically, sir. By name, she knows who you are, and she claims she has information about the recent raids on the supply trains. But here's the thing that's got everyone worked up. She says she only talked to you, and only at sunrise." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. Very few Apache knew his name, and those who did had good reason to either fear or hate him. The supply train raids had cost them dearly, 3 wagons lost in the past month, along with several good men. "Has anyone questioned her about how she knows my name?" Marcus asked, already walking toward the holding cells. "Colonel Morrison tried, sir, but she just stares right through him like he's not even there. Won't say a word to anyone else. Some of the men think she might be some kind of witch or medicine woman." The crowd parted as Marcus approached, revealing the holding cell. Inside sat a young Apache woman, probably no more than 25 years old. Her long black hair was braided with small pieces of turquoise, and despite her circumstances, she held herself with remarkable dignity. Her dark eyes found Marcus immediately, and he felt as though she was looking directly into his soul. "You came," she said in clear English, her voice carrying across the space between them like a desert wind. "I knew you would." Marcus stepped closer to the iron bars, studying her face carefully. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. Her clothing was traditional Apache deerskin dress decorated with beadwork, but it showed signs of long travel. "I'm Captain Thompson. I understand you've been asking for me. What's this about?" The woman rose gracefully to her feet, moving to stand directly in front of the bars. She was smaller than he had expected, but her presence seemed to fill the entire cell. When she spoke, her words were measured and precise. "My name is Ayana. It means eternal blossom in my language. But you knew my brother by a different name. You called him Red Hawk." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Red Hawk had been a Apache warrior he'd encountered twice in battle. The first time, Marcus had been leading a patrol that stumbled into an Apache camp. In the confusion of the fight, he'd seen Red Hawk protecting a group of women and children, helping them escape while drawing fire away from them. The second encounter had been different. A direct confrontation where Marcus had been forced to kill the warrior in hand-to-hand combat. "Red Hawk is dead," Marcus said quietly, the memory of that day flooding back to him. "He died with honor, if that means anything to you." Ayanna nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I know. I felt his spirit leave this world. But his death is not why I am here, Captain Thompson. I am here because of what he told me about you before he died." The crowd of soldiers had grown quiet, straining to hear the conversation. Marcus was aware of their presence, but his focus remained entirely on the young woman before him. There was something in her eyes, not hatred, as he might have expected, but something else entirely. "What did he tell you?" "He said you were different from the other soldiers. He said that when you fought him, you looked into his eyes and saw a man, not just an enemy. He said you whispered words to him as he died, words of respect for a fallen warrior." Marcus remembered that moment vividly. Red Hawk had fought bravely, and in his final moments, Marcus had indeed spoken to him in Apache, words he'd learned from a peaceful chief years earlier. Words that honored the courage of a defeated enemy. "How could he have told you this if he died in my arms?" Marcus asked, though even as he spoke, he realized how foolish the question sounded. Ayanna smiled for the first time, an expression that transformed her entire face. "My brother did not die immediately, Captain. He lived long enough to crawl back to our hidden camp. Long enough to tell me about the soldier with gray eyes who fought with honor and spoke our words. Long enough to make me promise something that brings me here today." The sun had fully risen, now casting bright light into the cell and illuminating Ayanna's face. Marcus could see strength there and intelligence, but also something that looked like sadness mixed with determination. "What promise?" Marcus asked, though part of him feared the answer. "He made me promise to find you, Captain Thompson. To find you and deliver a message that he could not give you himself. A message about the raids on your supply trains and about something much bigger that is coming." Marcus felt the weight of every eye upon him as he processed Ayanna's words. The morning air had grown warmer, but a cold knot formed in his stomach. Supply train raids were one thing, they were costly and dangerous, but they were a known threat. Something bigger suggested a coordinated attack, possibly on the fort itself. "Colonel Morrison isn't going to like this," Sergeant Rodriguez muttered behind him, echoing Marcus's own thoughts. The colonel was a by-the-book military man who viewed all Apache as hostile enemies to be defeated, not sources of information to be trusted. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "Open the cell." The words fell into the morning air like stones into still water. The gathered soldiers began murmuring among themselves, some stepping back instinctively. Lieutenant Hayes moved forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Sir, are you certain that's wise?" "We don't know what she's capable of, and the colonel specifically ordered that she remain secured until he could question her himself." "The colonel isn't here right now." "And this woman came here voluntarily," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority of years of command. "She could have delivered her message from a safe distance if she'd wanted to. The fact that she's willing to sit in a military prison tells me she's serious about whatever information she has." The soldier with the keys hesitated, looking between Marcus and the other officers. Finally, Marcus stepped forward and held out his hand. "Give me the keys, Private." With obvious reluctance, the young soldier handed over the ring of iron keys. Marcus found the right one and inserted it into the lock. The click of the mechanism seemed unnaturally loud in the desert silence. Ayanna stepped out of the cell with fluid grace, but she made no move to run or fight. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus and said, "Thank you for trusting me, Captain. Your brother would have done the same." "My brother?" Marcus asked, confused by the reference. "Red Hawk. After he fought you, he spoke of you as a brother warrior. In my tribe, when two fighters meet in honorable combat, they become connected by that shared experience. He saw you as family, even though you were enemies." The concept was foreign to Marcus's military training, but something about it resonated in his chest. He had indeed felt a strange connection to Red Hawk during their final moments together, a respect that transcended their opposing sides in the war. "What did he want you to tell me?" Marcus asked, gesturing for her to walk with him away from the crowd of soldiers. They moved toward a small cluster of rocks that would provide some privacy. Ayana paused before speaking, her eyes scanning the horizon as if checking for threats. The raids on your supply trains are not random attacks, Captain Thompson. They are being coordinated by a war chief named Black Eagle. He is gathering warriors from different tribes, promising them great victories against the white soldiers. Marcus had heard whispers of Black Eagle, but no concrete intelligence. How many warriors is he gathering? More than your fort could defend against, Ayana replied simply. But that is not the most dangerous part of his plan. Black Eagle has made an alliance with someone inside your own military. Someone who tells him when your supply trains will travel, what routes they will take, and how many soldiers will guard them. The words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. A traitor among their own ranks would explain how the Apaches seem to know exactly when and where to strike. It would also explain why their recent attempts to vary their routes and schedules had failed to prevent attacks. Do you know who this person is? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Suspecting treachery among his fellow officers was almost as painful as facing enemy bullets. Red Hawk never learned the name, but he saw this person meeting with Black Eagle twice. He described him as a tall soldier with yellow hair and a scar across his left cheek. He wore the markings of a leader. Marcus's blood ran cold. The description perfectly matched Major William Crawford, the fort's quartermaster and the man responsible for coordinating all supply movements. Crawford had been at the fort longer than almost anyone, and his scar was a well-known souvenir from a skirmish with Comanche raiders years earlier. There's more, Ayana continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Black Eagle is planning a major attack on this fort. He believes your traitor friend will help him by weakening your defenses from inside. The attack is planned for the new moon, when the darkness will hide his approach. Marcus calculated quickly in his head. The new moon was only 5 days away. If Ayana was telling the truth, they had less than a week to prepare for an assault that would come with inside knowledge of their weaknesses. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. Your people could win a great victory if this plan succeeds. Ayana was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains where her people made their homes. When she finally spoke, her words carried a weight of sadness that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. Because Red Hawk also told me something else about you, Captain Thompson. He said you were the only soldier he'd met who looked at Apache children and saw children, not future enemies. He said you once let a group of women and children escape rather than pursue them, even though your orders were to capture all Apache on sight. Marcus remembered that incident as well. It had been during a raid on what they'd thought was a warrior camp, but had turned out to be mostly families hiding from the conflict. He'd watched women clutching babies to their chests and children cowering behind their mothers, and he'd made a decision that had earned him a reprimand from his superiors. Those were non-combatants, Marcus said simply. They posed no threat. Exactly, Ayana replied. And that is why Red Hawk believed you might be different. Why he believed you might be willing to hear what I have to say about preventing this war from becoming much worse. She turned to face him fully, and Marcus saw tears glistening in her dark eyes. Black Eagle's plan will not just destroy your fort, Captain Thompson. He intends to use the victory here as a symbol to unite all the tribes in the territory. He believes that if he can show that the white man's strongest fortress can be taken, other chiefs will join his war. The implications were staggering. A united Apache uprising would mean death and destruction across the entire territory. Towns, ranches, and smaller outposts would be defenseless against such a coordinated assault. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people would die on both sides. What do you propose? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. I propose that we stop Black Eagle together, Ayana said. But first you must deal with your traitor. As long as Major Crawford can feed information to Black Eagle, any defense you prepare will fail. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about the conflict, about loyalty, and about his enemies was being turned upside down. Here was an Apache woman, sister to a warrior he'd killed, offering to help him defend his fort against her own people. This could be an elaborate trap, he said, voicing the suspicion that military training demanded he consider. It could be, Ayana agreed. But ask yourself this, Captain Thompson. If I wanted to trap you, would I have come alone and unarmed into your prison? Would I have given you information about your own traitor first? Something that helps you regardless of whether you trust me about the rest? Marcus realized she was right. The information about Crawford was valuable whether or not the rest of her story was true. And something in her manner, in the way she spoke about her brother and about the coming violence, convinced him that she was being honest. Marcus spent the rest of that day wrestling with impossible decisions. He'd assigned Ayana to quarters under guard, not a prison cell, but not freedom either. The compromise had angered both his fellow officers, who thought she should remain locked up, and probably Ayana herself, though she'd accepted the arrangement without complaint. As evening approached, Marcus found himself walking the ramparts of the fort, ostensibly checking the defenses but really trying to organize his thoughts. The information about Major Crawford gnawed at him like an infected wound. Crawford had been his friend for over 2 years, had saved his life during the Comanche raid that had given the Major his distinctive scar. Troubled evening, Captain. Marcus turned to find Crawford himself approaching along the wooden walkway. The Major's yellow hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and his scarred cheek was turned away, hidden in shadow. For the first time, Marcus found himself studying his friend with suspicious eyes. Just thinking about our supply situation, Marcus replied carefully. The raids have been costly. Crawford nodded, joining Marcus at the wall overlooking the desert. Indeed they have. I've been working with Colonel Morrison on new security measures. Perhaps varying our routes more randomly, changing our departure times? The words sounded perfectly reasonable, exactly what a loyal quartermaster should be doing. But Ayana's information had planted a seed of doubt that Marcus couldn't ignore. How easy would it be for Crawford to share those very changes with Black Eagle, making them worthless? What do you think about the Apache woman we captured? Marcus asked, watching Crawford's reaction carefully. The Major's expression didn't change. But Marcus noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. I think Colonel Morrison is right to be cautious. Apache are known for their deception. She could be feeding us false information to lure us into a trap. Or she could be telling the truth, Marcus suggested. About what, specifically? Has she said something new since this morning? There it was, the probing question that a guilty man might ask to find out how much had been revealed. An innocent man might ask what she'd said, but Crawford wanted to know if there was new information beyond what he'd already heard about. Nothing concrete, Marcus lied smoothly. Just general warnings about increased Apache activity in the region. Crawford seemed to relax slightly. Well, we'll need to take any information from her with considerable skepticism. These people are expert at psychological warfare. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but Marcus's attention was focused on observing his friend's behavior. Every question Crawford asked about Ayana, every suggestion about how to handle her information, seemed calculated to determine whether she posed a threat to some hidden agenda when they finally parted. Marcus had made up his mind about what needed to happen next. He waited until well after midnight before making his way to Ayana's quarters. The guard he'd posted was dozing in his chair. Not unusual for the late watch, but Marcus made a mental note to speak with the man's sergeant. He entered the small room quietly, expecting to find Ayana asleep. Instead, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, perfectly alert, as if she'd been waiting for him. You have decided to trust me, she said without looking up. It wasn't a question. I'm leaning that way, Marcus admitted, settling into the room's single chair. But I need to know more about your plan to stop Black Eagle, and I need to understand why you're really doing this. Ayana finally looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the small window. I told you why. To prevent a larger war that will destroy both our peoples. That's part of it, but not all of it, Marcus pressed. There's something personal in this for you. Something beyond honoring your brother's wishes. For a long moment, Ayana said nothing. Then she rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the star-filled desert sky. I have a daughter, she said finally. Her name is Ista, which means snow. She is 4 years old, and she has never known a world without war. She flinches when she hears horses approaching, because horses usually mean soldiers are coming. She knows how to hide in the rocks and stay silent for hours, because that is how children stay alive in these times. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He'd never thought about Apache children living in constant fear, constantly on the run. In his mind, the enemy had been faceless, a threat to be eliminated rather than people with families and hopes for the future. "Where is she now?" he asked. "Safe, with my sister's family in the high country." But if Black Eagle's war succeeds, if all the tribes unite in a great uprising, there will be nowhere safe for any child, Apache or white. The army will respond with overwhelming force, and our people will be hunted like animals until none remain. The truth of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. A coordinated Apache uprising would indeed provoke a massive military response, probably ending with the complete destruction of the Apache way of life. The government would not tolerate such a threat to westward expansion. "So your plan is to help us defeat Black Eagle to save your own people from extinction," Marcus said. "Partly, yes. But also because I have seen enough death, Captain Thompson. I watched Red Hawk die, believing that there might be honor in both sides of this conflict. I want to believe he was right." Marcus understood now why she'd taken such an enormous risk to come here. She wasn't just trying to prevent a battle. She was trying to prevent the final destruction of her people's future. "Tell me about your plan," he said. Ayanna returned to sit facing him, her expression growing focused and determined. "First, you must deal with Major Crawford without alerting him to what you know. If he discovers that his treachery has been exposed, he will warn Black Eagle, and the war chief will change his plans. How do you suggest I handle that?" "Give him false information. Tell him you're planning to move the fort's ammunition supply to a secure location outside the walls. Make it seem like a precaution against the increased Apache activity. When Crawford passes this information to Black Eagle, the war chief will believe he has a chance to capture a large ammunition supply along with attacking the fort." Marcus could see the logic in this approach. "But we won't actually move the ammunition." "Exactly. Instead, you'll use it as bait to draw Black Eagle's force into a position where they can be defeated decisively. But this is the part that will be difficult for you to accept, Captain Thompson." "What part?" "I must be the one to deliver the false information to Black Eagle. He knows I am Red Hawk's sister, and he will trust intelligence that appears to come from me. But Crawford cannot know that I am working with you. Black Eagle must believe that I escaped from the fort or was released and brought him valuable intelligence." The plan was audacious and dangerous, requiring Marcus to trust an Apache woman with crucial information about his fort's defenses while simultaneously letting her return to the enemy camp. Every instinct of military training screamed against such a course of action. "There's another problem," Marcus said. "Colonel Morrison will never approve such a plan. He'll order you held as a prisoner indefinitely, and he certainly won't authorize giving you access to sensitive military information." "Then Colonel Morrison must not know about the plan until it is already in motion," Ayanna said simply. Marcus stared at her, realizing what she was suggesting. "You're asking me to commit treason against my own commanding officer." "I am asking you to choose between following orders and preventing a massacre," she replied. "Red Hawk told me that you were a man who could see beyond the uniform to the person underneath. I'm hoping he was right about that as well." The weight of the decision settled on Marcus like a heavy blanket. Trust an Apache woman, deceive his commanding officer, and risk his career and possibly his life on the hope that peace might be possible between two peoples who had been killing each other for decades. But as he looked at Ayanna, he saw something that gave him hope, the same look he'd seen in Red Hawk's eyes during their final moments together. Not hatred or bloodlust, but a weary sadness mixed with determination to find something better than endless war. "When would you need to leave?" he asked. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Marcus had barely slept, but he moved through his duties with practiced efficiency while his mind worked on the details of their desperate plan. The first step was the most dangerous, convincing. Major Crawford that the fort's ammunition needed to be moved while making the Major believe it was his own idea. Marcus found Crawford in the quartermaster's office, hunched over supply ledgers and transport schedules. The Major looked up as Marcus entered, his scarred face showing the strain of recent weeks. "Morning, Marcus. I've been going over our defensive supplies, trying to calculate how long we could withstand a sustained assault." The comment provided Marcus with the perfect opening. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you, Bill. I've been thinking about our ammunition storage. Having it all concentrated in the main armory makes us vulnerable if the Apache managed to breach the walls." Crawford's interest was immediately apparent. "You think we should disperse it?" "I think we should move the bulk of it outside the fort entirely," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from Crawford's desk. "There's that old mining shack about 2 miles north, defensible position, but far enough away that even if they took the fort, they couldn't get to our main ammunition supply." Marcus watched Crawford's reaction carefully. The Major's eyes showed quick calculation, and Marcus could almost see him thinking about how valuable this information would be to Black Eagle. "It's an interesting idea," Crawford said slowly. "But wouldn't that leave us vulnerable if we needed that ammunition during a siege? We'd keep enough for immediate defense here at the fort. The external cache would be insurance against total loss and a fallback position if we needed to retreat and regroup." Crawford nodded thoughtfully, and Marcus knew the bait had been taken. "When were you thinking of making such a move?" "Tomorrow night would be ideal. Dark moon means less chance of being spotted by Apache scouts. I was thinking of using a small detail, maybe 6 men, to avoid attracting attention." "I could arrange the logistics," Crawford offered. Exactly as Marcus had hoped he would. "I'd appreciate that, Bill, but let's keep this between us for now. No need to worry the enlisted men unnecessarily." After leaving Crawford's office, Marcus made his way to Ayana's quarters. He found her braiding thin strips of leather into what looked like a map, marking locations with small knots and colored beads. "It's done," he told her. Crawford took the bait. "I estimate he'll get word to Black Eagle within 24 hours. Ayana looked up from her work, studying his face intently. "You look troubled, Captain Thompson. Are you having second thoughts?" Marcus sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of his 43 years. "I've been a soldier for 25 years. I've followed orders through 3 wars and countless skirmishes. What we're planning goes against everything I was trained to do. And yet you continue with the plan. Why?" The question forced Marcus to examine his own motivations more deeply than he was comfortable with. "Because I keep thinking about what you said about your daughter, about children growing up in fear. Both Apache and white children deserve better than that." Ayana's hand stilled on her braiding. "There's something else I must tell you, Captain Thompson. Something that Red Hawk made me promise to share, but only if I decided you were truly worthy of trust." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What is it?" "Red Hawk was not the first Apache warrior to speak of you. There are stories told around our fires, stories of a soldier with gray eyes who fights with honor. Stories of times you spared non-combatants, of wounded enemies you treated with respect rather than cruelty. Those were just individual decisions based on specific circumstances," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the idea that his actions had become legend among his enemies. "Perhaps. But those stories are why I believed my brother when he said you might be different. And they are why other Apache might be willing to listen if peace becomes possible." The weight of responsibility settled even more heavily on Marcus's shoulders. He'd never considered that his actions in combat were being observed and discussed by Apache families, becoming part of their understanding of who their enemies truly were. "There's something I need to know," Marcus said. "If our plan succeeds, if we stop Black Eagle and Crawford, what happens next? Do we just go back to the same cycle of raids and reprisals?" Ayana set aside her braiding and met his eyes directly. "That depends on whether there are more soldiers like you, Captain Thompson. And whether there are Apache leaders brave enough to talk instead of fight. Are there such leaders?" "There is one. Chief Standing Bear of the Shirakawa. He is old, and he has grown weary of watching his people die for victories that never bring lasting peace. If Black Eagle can be defeated, and if it can be done in a way that does not humiliate all Apache, Standing Bear might be willing to negotiate. Marcus had heard of Standing Bear, a respected war chief who had been fighting the army for over a decade. The idea that such a man might be willing to consider peace was almost too hopeful to believe. What would he want in return for peace? A reservation with good water and hunting grounds? Protection from white settlers who would steal Apache land? The right to raise children without fear? The same things any people want? It sounded so simple when stated like that, but Marcus knew the reality would be far more complex. There were too many interests involved, military, political, commercial, for any easy resolution. "We're getting ahead of ourselves," Marcus said finally. "First, we have to survive the next few days." That evening, Marcus met privately with Sergeant Rodriguez and Lieutenant Hayes, the two men he trusted most among his officers. He decided that the plan had too many moving parts to execute alone, and he would need help from men who could think independently under pressure. "What I'm about to tell you goes no further than this room," Marcus began. "And what I'm going to ask you to do may end all our careers if it goes wrong." Rodriguez, ever practical, simply nodded. Hayes looked nervous but determined. "We're listening, Captain." Marcus outlined the situation with Crawford and the planned deception involving the ammunition movement. He told them about Ayana's intelligence regarding Black Eagle's plans, though he left out some of the more sensitive details about Apache politics and potential peace negotiations. "So we're trusting our lives to an Apache woman's word against a fellow officer," Hayes said when Marcus finished. "That's a hell of a thing, sir." "It is," Marcus agreed. "But consider this. Everything she's told us about the supply train raids has checked out. The timing, the locations, the tactics used, and she came here voluntarily, knowing she could be executed as a spy." Rodriguez spoke up for the first time. "What do you need from us, Captain?" "Tomorrow night, when Crawford thinks we're moving ammunition to that mining shack, I need you to actually move something there. Empty crates made to look like ammunition boxes, enough to convince any Apache scouts watching from a distance. Meanwhile, Hayes, you'll help me prepare the real defensive positions based on Ayana's intelligence about Black Eagle's attack plan." "And the Apache woman?" Hayes asked. "What happens to her?" Marcus took a deep breath before answering. "She escapes tomorrow night during the confusion of the fake ammunition movement. Or at least that's what everyone will think happened." The two officers exchanged glances, understanding the implications. They would be helping an enemy spy escape, at least in the eyes of anyone who didn't know the full truth. "Sir," Rodriguez said carefully, "if this goes wrong, they'll court-martial all of us. If this goes wrong, Sergeant, we'll probably all be dead anyway. Black Eagle's force outnumbers us 3-1, and they'll have inside knowledge of our defenses. Our only chance is to turn their advantages against them." Marcus looked at both men, seeing his own doubts and determination reflected in their faces. "I won't order you to do this. It has to be your choice." Hayes was the first to speak. "I'm in, Captain. I've got a wife and kids back in Ohio. If there's a chance this could help end the fighting out here, I'll take that chance." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "My family's been in this territory for 3 generations. We've seen enough blood on both sides. Count me in." As his officers left to begin their preparations, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror. The die was cast now, the plan set in motion. By this time tomorrow night they would either have taken the first step toward an unprecedented peace, or they would have committed treason against everything they'd sworn to protect. The day of the deception dawned clear and hot, with no wind to stir the desert dust. Marcus moved through his normal routines, but every interaction felt charged with hidden significance. When he passed Major Crawford in the corridor, he had to resist the urge to study the man's face for signs of guilt or betrayal. Colonel Morrison called a staff meeting that afternoon, and Marcus found himself sitting across from Crawford as they discussed routine supply issues and patrol schedules. The colonel was a competent but unimaginative officer who had earned his position through steady service rather than brilliance. He would follow procedures precisely, which made what Marcus was planning all the more dangerous. "Any word from our Apache prisoner?" Morrison asked during the meeting. "Has she provided any useful intelligence?" Crawford answered before Marcus could speak. "Nothing concrete, sir. Mostly general warnings about increased hostile activity. I believe she's hoping to trade vague information for better treatment." The lie came so smoothly from Crawford's lips that Marcus had to admire the man's duplicity even as it sickened him. How long had Crawford been betraying them? How many good soldiers had died because of intelligence passed to their enemies? "Perhaps we should transfer her to territorial headquarters," Morrison mused. "Let them determine her value as an intelligence asset." "I'd prefer to keep her here for now," Marcus interjected. "She seems willing to talk, but only to me. Moving her might cause her to shut down completely." Morrison nodded absently, already moving on to other concerns. "Very well, Captain. But don't let sentiment cloud your judgment. These people are expert manipulators." As the meeting ended, Crawford approached Marcus with what appeared to be casual friendliness. "Still planning that supply movement tonight?" "Yes, though I'm having second thoughts about the wisdom of it. Moving anything in the dark carries risks." Crawford's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of risks are you worried about?" "Apache scouts mainly. If they spotted a small detail moving away from the fort at night, they might follow to see what we're up to. Could expose our fallback position." Marcus watched Crawford's reaction carefully. The major was trying to look concerned, but there was something else in his expression. Eagerness, perhaps, or calculation. "Maybe you should postpone until we have better intelligence about Apache movements in the area," Crawford suggested. "No, I think we need to do it tonight. The longer we wait, the more vulnerable our current storage becomes. I'll just have to rely on good scouts and careful timing." Crawford nodded, but Marcus could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. The major would definitely be getting word to Black Eagle about the movement, probably emphasizing the vulnerability of the small detail carrying valuable ammunition. That evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Marcus made his final preparations. Sergeant Rodriguez had assembled 6 trusted men and loaded 2 wagons with empty ammunition crates filled with sand to give them proper weight. From a distance, especially in darkness, they would appear exactly like legitimate ammunition shipments. Marcus visited Ayanna one last time before the deception began. She was ready, dressed in dark clothing suitable for night travel, her face painted with traditional patterns that would help her blend with shadows. "Are you certain about this?" Marcus asked. "Once you leave, there's no protection I can offer you. If Black Eagle suspects treachery, if Crawford somehow realizes what we're doing, then I will die," Ayanna said simply. "But if we do nothing, many more will die. Children will grow up in a world of endless war. That is not acceptable." Her calm acceptance of the risks involved humbled Marcus. She was gambling everything on the hope that peace might be possible between their peoples. "There's something I need to tell you before you go," Marcus said. "If this plan works, if we defeat Black Eagle and expose Crawford, there will still be consequences. The colonel will want to know how we obtained intelligence about the planned attack." "I may have to reveal your involvement." Ayanna nodded. "I understand. But if our plan succeeds, perhaps the truth will serve both our peoples better than more lies." At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus gave the signal to begin the fake ammunition movement. Rodriguez led the detail out of the fort's main gate, their wagons creaking convincingly under the weight of the sand-filled crates. To anyone watching, it would appear to be exactly what Crawford had reported, a small, vulnerable target carrying valuable military supplies. While the wagons made their way toward the abandoned mining shack, Marcus slipped through the fort's rear entrance with Ayanna. They had perhaps 20 minutes before her absence would be discovered, 20 minutes to get her far enough away that pursuit would be pointless. They moved swiftly through the desert scrub, using the darkness and their knowledge of the terrain to avoid the regular patrol routes. Ayanna moved like a ghost beside him, making no sound despite the rocky ground and thorny vegetation. "There," she whispered, pointing toward a cluster of large rocks about a mile from the fort. That is where I left my horse. They found the animal exactly where she'd said it would be, a strong-looking pinto mare hidden in a natural corral formed by the rocks. Someone had been caring for the horse, leaving water and feed, which meant Ayana had allies among the local Apache who had been watching and waiting. "Before you go," Marcus said, "I need to know what happens if your own people don't trust you. What if they think your time at the fort has compromised you?" Ayana swung up onto her horse with practiced ease. "Then I will convince them otherwise. Red Hawk's word still carries weight, even though he is dead. And I have information that will prove my loyalty." "What information?" She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I will tell Black Eagle that the soldiers at the fort are so confident of their security that they move ammunition at night with only 6 guards. I will tell him that their Captain Thompson is arrogant and believes Apache scouts are too incompetent to track such movements." Marcus understood. She would use his own reputation against him, making Black Eagle believe that the apparent vulnerability was real rather than calculated bait. "And if Black Eagle questions why you were released, I will tell him that I seduced a lonely soldier into helping me escape, and that I killed him to prevent him from raising an alarm. Apache warriors respect such cunning." The casual way she spoke about fabricating a murder story sent a chill through Marcus, reminding him of the cultural divide that still separated them despite their alliance. "How will I know if your mission succeeds?" Marcus asked. "Watch for smoke signals from the high peaks 2 days from now. 3 columns of smoke will mean Black Eagle has taken the bait and is moving his warriors into position for the attack. 4 columns will mean something has gone wrong." With that, she urged her horse forward and disappeared into the desert darkness. Leaving Marcus alone with his doubts and the weight of what they'd set in motion, he made his way back to the fort, timing his return to coincide with Rodriguez's wagon detail. By the time he reached the gates, word was already spreading that the Apache prisoner had escaped. Marcus played his part perfectly, expressing anger and ordering search parties. Knowing they would find no trace of Ayana, Colonel Morrison was furious when he learned of the escape, especially after Marcus reported that the guard had been found, unconscious with a head injury that suggested he'd been attacked from behind. "How did she get out of a locked room and past a guard?" Morrison demanded. "She must have hidden something she could use as a weapon," Marcus replied. "These people are resourceful. We should have searched her more thoroughly." Crawford was present during this discussion, and Marcus noted with satisfaction that the major seemed more interested than angry about Ayana's escape. A guilty conscience would explain such a reaction. Crawford would be pleased that a potential source of damaging information was no longer in custody. "Well, she's gone now," Morrison said finally. "Double the guard rotation and increase patrols. If there are more Apache in the area, I want to know about it." As the officers dispersed, Crawford lingered behind. "Unfortunate about the prisoner," he said to Marcus. "Do you think she learned anything useful while she was here?" "Hard to say. She observed our routines, counted our men, noted our defensive positions, standard intelligence gathering." Crawford nodded, but Marcus could see him thinking about implications. The major would definitely be reporting Ayana's escape to Black Eagle, along with the information about the ammunition movement. The trap was set. 2 days later, Marcus stood on the fort's highest watchtower, scanning the distant peaks for smoke signals. The waiting was almost unbearable, knowing that Ayana was somewhere out there, probably surrounded by warriors who would kill her instantly if they suspected her true mission. Then, just as the sun reached its zenith, he saw them 3 thin columns of smoke rising from different peaks. Visible for only a few minutes before dissipating in the desert air, Black Eagle had taken the bait. The war chief was moving his forces into position, probably planning to strike the following night when the new moon would provide maximum darkness for the attack. Now came the most dangerous part of their plan, using Black Eagle's own strategy against him while keeping Crawford from realizing that his treachery had been discovered. The morning of the expected attack dawned with an eerie stillness that seemed to blanket the entire fort. Marcus had spent the night making final preparations, positioning men according to the intelligence Ayana had provided about Black Eagle's planned assault routes. Every decision felt like a gamble with lives as stakes. Marcus called Crawford to his office under the pretense of discussing additional security measures. He needed to keep the major close where he could be watched. And he needed to feed him one final piece of misinformation. "I've been thinking about last night's escape," Marcus said as Crawford settled into a chair. "It's possible that woman learned more about our defenses than we realized?" Crawford leaned forward with apparent concern. "What kind of information?" "Guard rotations, ammunition storage, weak points in our perimeter. If she reports back to her people, we could be facing an attack soon." "Do you really think they'd be bold enough to assault the fort directly?" Marcus pretended to consider the question carefully. "Maybe not a direct assault, but they might try something at night. Sabotage, perhaps, or an attempt to breach the walls while we're sleeping." Crawford nodded thoughtfully. "What precautions are you taking?" "I'm pulling most of our men inside the main compound tonight and strengthening the interior defenses. If they do attack, we'll let them get close before we spring our counterattack." Marcus watched Crawford's eyes light up with interest. This was exactly the kind of information that would be valuable to Black Eagle, confirmation that the defenders would be concentrated in predictable positions, making the war chief's assault plan more likely to succeed. "Smart thinking," Crawford said. "I'll make sure all our supplies are secured as well." After Crawford left, Marcus allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Major would undoubtedly find a way to get word to Black Eagle about the defensive arrangements. Not realizing that he was actually providing information about a carefully constructed trap. As evening approached, Marcus gathered his trusted officers for final instructions. Rodriguez and Hayes had been discreetly positioning men in concealed locations around the fort's perimeter, creating overlapping fields of fire that would catch attacking Apache in deadly crossfires. "Remember," Marcus told them, "we need to let them get close enough to commit fully to their attack before we reveal our true positions. If they realize it's a trap too early, they'll scatter into the desert, and we'll never get another chance like this." Lieutenant Hayes raised a concern that had been troubling Marcus as well. "Sir, what about Major Crawford?" "When the shooting starts, he'll be in danger along with everyone else. Crawford will be safely positioned in the command bunker," Marcus replied. "Away from the fighting, but where he can't interfere with our operations or get word to the enemy." As full darkness settled over the fort, Marcus took his position on the ramparts where he could observe the entire battlefield. The moon was just a thin sliver, providing almost no light to betray hidden positions or reveal the movements of attackers. The first sign of the assault came at exactly midnight, a barely audible whistle from the eastern approach. The signal Ayanna had told him Black Eagle would use to coordinate his warriors. Marcus felt his heart begin to pound as he realized that everything they had planned was about to be tested by fire and blood. Dark shapes began moving across the desert floor, approaching the fort from multiple directions simultaneously. Marcus could make out perhaps 50 or 60 warriors, more than enough to overwhelm the fort's normal defenses. They moved with the silent efficiency that made Apache fighters legendary throughout the territory. According to Ayanna's intelligence, Black Eagle's plan called for simultaneous attacks on 3 sides of the fort, with the main assault coming from the north where the walls were lowest. A smaller group would create a diversion at the main gate while the primary force attempted to scale the northern wall and capture the ammunition storage area. Marcus waited, every nerve stretched taut, as the Apache warriors moved closer to their target positions. He could see them clearly now through his field glasses, painted faces, traditional weapons mixed with captured army rifles. The confident movements of men who believed surprise was on their side. The attack began with a sudden burst of rifle fire from the eastern side of the fort, exactly as Ayanna had predicted. Several warriors appeared at the main gate, whooping and firing at the guards while making no serious attempt to breach the entrance. It was pure theater, designed to draw attention away from the real assault. Black Eagle himself led the main attack on the northern wall, just as Ayanna had said he would. Marcus watched through his glasses as the war chief and 30 warriors approached the weakest section of the fortification, carrying scaling ropes and grappling hooks. This was the moment of maximum danger for their plan. If Marcus revealed his trap too early, the Apache would escape. Too late, and they might actually breach the walls and cause real damage before being stopped. Black Eagle's warriors reached the base of the northern wall and began their assault. Ropes flew through the air, catching on the wooden palisade, and warriors started climbing with remarkable speed and agility. From their perspective, the fort's defenses were exactly as Crawford had reported, concentrated in the center. Leaving the perimeter vulnerable, Marcus waited until the first Apache warrior reached the top of the wall before giving the signal that would spring their trap. A single torch dropped from the command tower, visible to all the concealed defenders. Immediately, the night exploded with gunfire from positions Black Eagle had no way of knowing existed. Warriors, who thought they were attacking an unprepared position, suddenly found themselves caught in devastating crossfire. The scaling ropes were cut, sending climbers falling back to the ground. The diversion at the main gate collapsed as hidden marksmen began picking off the Apache attackers, but Black Eagle was an experienced war chief who had survived many battles through quick thinking and tactical flexibility. Instead of panicking when his assault was revealed to be walking into a trap, he immediately began organizing a fighting withdrawal, using his remaining warriors to provide covering fire while the wounded were evacuated. Marcus realized with growing respect for his enemy that Black Eagle was going to escape with most of his force intact. The Apache withdrawal was being conducted with the same skill and coordination as their attack had been. It was then that the final phase of Ayana's plan revealed itself. Just as Black Eagle's warriors began their retreat toward the eastern desert, a new force appeared from the darkness, Apache warriors led by an older man. Marcus recognized from descriptions as Chief Standing Bear, but these warriors weren't attacking the fort. They were positioning themselves to cut off Black Eagle's escape route, trapping the war chief between the fort's defenders and a force of his own people. The sound of Apache voices calling to each other across the battlefield was unlike anything Marcus had heard before. This wasn't the usual war cries or tactical communication, but something that sounded almost like negotiation, argument, even pleading. Ayana appeared at Standing Bear's side, clearly visible in the torchlight that now illuminated the area around the fort. She was speaking urgently to Black Eagle, gesturing toward the fort and toward Standing Bear's warriors. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could read the body language and tone. Ayana was explaining what had happened, telling Black Eagle that his plan had been compromised, not by superior military intelligence, but by Apache who wanted to prevent the larger war that would destroy their people. The confrontation lasted for perhaps 10 minutes, with warriors from both Apache factions maintaining defensive positions while their leaders debated. Marcus kept his own men in position but ordered them to hold fire unless directly attacked. Finally, Black Eagle's voice rang out across the desert, speaking in English so that the soldiers in the fort could understand his words. "I am Black Eagle of the Shirakawa Apache. I have been defeated this night not by your soldiers alone, but by my own people who believe the path of war leads only to destruction. I do not accept their wisdom, but I acknowledge their right to speak for our nation." The war chief paused, and when he continued, there was something like sadness in his voice. "I will take my warriors and leave this territory. We will not return to fight against the white soldiers or against our own people who choose to talk rather than fight. But I do not surrender, and I do not make peace. I simply remove myself from a conflict I no longer understand." With that, Black Eagle and his remaining warriors melted back into the desert darkness, leaving Standing Bear, Ayana, and perhaps 20 Apache warriors facing the fort. Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He ordered the gates opened and walked out into the night to meet with his enemies, knowing that he was either about to make history or commit the final act of his military career. Standing Bear was an impressive figure even in defeat, tall, dignified, with the bearing of a man who had led warriors in battle for decades. When he spoke, his English was slow but clear. "Captain Thompson, I am Standing Bear. This woman tells me you are a man who might speak truth even with enemies. I would hear your words about what happens next."